On the box table saw. So first things first, I'm going to go through all the different parts. I'm going to be moving the camera around so you guys can get a better view on what I call the box table saw. All it is this box on top of a regular table saw. So this table saw right here, underneath here, okay, we actually have two of these table saws. One has a box on it. The box stays on the table saw at all times. It doesn't come off, okay? So I'm going to show you the different parts. Okay, so on this saw, you have this wheel, which is the tilt. And that causes the blade to go this way or that way. You're not going to use this on the box saw at all, but I needed to let you know what this was for. Okay? So as you come around the corner, okay, you have this wheel right here that raises the blade up and down, and I'll show you on top in a second. You have the on and off switch, you have the power on and off switch. Now, when I turn this off, it disengages the power completely. Okay? When I turn it on, now the power is engaged, but the saw is not running and will not run till I pull this paddle out. Okay? So I want to show you something real quick. Let me check this. Okay, I'm going to turn the saw on only to show you that these lights actually function as a warning system for you. Okay? The saw is now on. Okay? When I turn the saw off, this light blinks. When it stops blinking, that means that the blade has come to a complete stop. It's very important that you do not move this box until this light has stopped blinking. Okay? Now we're going to go on top. Hold on one second. All right. So the first thing you do when you come to this box, the first thing you do is this. Hold on one second. The first thing you're going to do is check the height of the blade, okay? And you want to make an adjustment based on the material that you're cutting. So in this case, this blade is too high to make this cut, okay? I don't want more than the distance from the point of the tooth to this valley sticking up above the stock that I'm cutting. Okay, so we're going to use that wheel down in the middle to lower the blade down. And we're going to say that that is okay. Now, there's some other things that you need to take into account. I never want to cut on a particular piece of material. So I'm going to show you this piece right here. I never want to cut a piece that's less than 1/4 of an inch. In other words, if I was cutting on this side of the line, I'd be cutting less than 1/4 inch. And the reason for that is that after you cut it, okay, see this gap right here? If I cut a piece that's really thin and smaller than 1/4 of an inch, there's always a possibility that it's going to come off, slide into the gap, and get caught between the blade and this hole. And that's going to cause the blade to stop. Okay? So you don't want to cut anything smaller than 1/4 of an inch. If you have to cut something smaller than 1/4 of an inch, we will do something to ensure that you don't have a problem with making that cut. Okay, what I want to show you is that you can cut small pieces of material. I'm not going to measure this. I'm just going to make a cut so you guys can see it. Okay. I've already adjusted the blade to where it needs to be. Alright. So the first thing that you need to do is when you're cutting, you got to make sure that there is no gap right here. Okay? You don't want to cut like this, where there's a gap. We'll call this the fence. So you don't want to cut with a gap between the stock that you're cutting and the fence. You want it to be tight. Okay? Otherwise, it could shift while you're cutting, and then you're going to have some problems. All right. I'm not going to give you any particular measurement. I'm just going to set this up. This is the blade guard, and it slides right down on your material. Okay? You don't want to force it down. It's got to slide down evenly. So if you put it down evenly, it'll slide down evenly. Make sure it's back against the fence when you're cutting. Turn the saw on. And in this case, what you're going to do is push the whole box until it stops moving. Once it stops moving, reach around and push that big red pedal in. Watch the light to make sure that the light has stopped blinking. Now I can pull the whole box back, pick the guard up, and here's my piece. Now, I'm going to make another cut, but only to show you something really quick. Okay, let's just say that I want to cut this piece right where I have it marked. Okay, can you guys see that? I know that this blade is going to take off at least this much material. Whatever this crosscut is going to come off. So I want this piece. So that means I want to cut on this side. Okay, so I'm going to show you that. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. All right. So I want to put my line on this corner of the kerf cut, because this is the piece I want. If I put the line on the other side, this piece is going to be too small. So I want to make sure that I put my line on the right side of the kerf, because this is the piece I want that's on the right side. Okay. So once I've got that lined up, now I can put the box on it. Now notice that this is a very small piece. Okay. It's quite small in fact. But you can cut small pieces on here without getting your hands anywhere near the blade. And that's the great thing about this saw. You're still going to get a 90-degree cut. It's going to be a clean cut, not like on the bandsaw where it can move and not be a straight 90-degree. On this box saw, it's going to be 90. So I'm going to make that one. Remember, once again, watch the light. Make sure the light stops flashing. When it stops flashing, now I can pull the box back. Okay? And I want to show you this because I am just a little bit off my mark. Okay? Just a little bit off my mark. So you got to practice that so you know exactly where to put the saw in order to make that cut. Okay? Now, one thing that you have to know, if you see this board, the grain of the wood is running this way. Okay, along the length of the board. We do not want to make that type of cut on this saw. because there's no splitter and the board can go back on itself and pinch that blade. So we don't want to do any rip cuts on this saw. This saw is only for cross cuts. You look at this, the grain of the wood, even though this is plywood, it's a good example of what I'm trying to get you to see. The grain of the wood is going this way. So on a longer piece, I wouldn't cut it here. I would cut it on the regular table saw, and we'll get to that much later. Okay, I'm just telling you that this saw is not for ripping. This saw is for cross cuts, going across the grain. This is plywood, so it really doesn't matter because it's not going to close on itself. But a solid piece of natural wood will pinch itself sometimes. So you want to make sure that you're not making that type of cut. All right, so I'm going to cut this piece just to show you one more time that I need to raise the blade, all right? And I'm just using this. A lot of people have different explanations for this, but I'm using the tip of the saw blade, the tip of the tooth down to the valley here where the two teeth come together. And I'm putting the blade just at that level. Okay. I'm going to make a random cut. Okay. Turn the saw on. Turn the saw off. Wait till it comes to a complete stop by watching the light, and I can pull it back. Okay. And there's my cut. One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to pull this too far back. Okay, and here's the reason. See these two pieces of wood right here? These are slides, and they go into this groove, right, that it's on the table saw. And if you pull it too far back, those slides are going to come off and the whole table is going to fall. Right now, these slides need to be adjusted. They are pretty loose, and I'm going to do that before you guys come into class to make sure that it's tighter. But you don't want to pull it too far back. The other thing is you're exposing the blade, so you don't want to do that. You only want to pull it far enough back to where the edge of the fence is at the edge of the table, the top of the saw. You don't want to pull it any farther than that. Unless you have a bigger piece that you're cutting and the piece goes from here to here. That's probably the widest piece you want to ever cut on this saw, because otherwise you'll be into the blade. So just make sure that if you have a question about what you're cutting, you're not sure, make sure that if you have a question and you're not certain about what you're doing, that you stop and come and get me and ask me if what you're doing is a good procedure to do. We'll talk about it. If I feel that it's too dangerous for you to do, I'll try it first to make sure that you're not going to get injured. With this saw, you don't want to, let me just mention one more thing before we go on. Okay, if you're going to cut, you don't want to put your hand right here. Okay, the blade is underneath there, so you don't want to put your hand there. You want to make sure that your hands are on the right and left side, and pull the box, push the box straight back and pull it straight back when the blade has stopped. And that's critical. You don't want to move the box until the blade stops. Now, I know that a lot of you will get in a hurry, and I've seen people come over here and cut, leave the saw running, pull it back, and then turn it off. That is incorrect. You don't want to do that. You want to make your cut, leave the box all the way to the end, turn it off, and wait till it stops, and then pull it back. Okay. A lot of things can happen in here with the different pieces that you cut. They can vibrate around, get into the saw, and then we could have all kinds of issues. So on this saw, make sure the blade is adjusted. Make sure you set your measurement on the right side or the proper side of the curve. Not always on the right side, but the proper side for the piece of material that you want to save. Don't just push this as fast as you can. Push it in a slow, even pace to give the blade enough time to cut. Don't push it fast, because then the blade's not given enough time to cut and you're putting too much pressure on that blade.